The steel beam felt solid beneath my gloved hand, cold, unforgiving, exactly as it should be. I was standing 200 feet above Chicago, wind whipping through the skeleton of what would become the Millennium Spire, back in 2003 when my knees didn't crack and my back didn't ache. A young laborer, maybe 25, watched me test the connection point where 4 massive girders met. "Mr. Gonzalez," he called over the wind, "the foreman already checked that joint twice." I didn't look up from my inspection. In construction, you don't trust what you can't verify yourself. Trust kills more buildings than bad design ever will. I ran my hand along the weld one more time, feeling for any imperfection, any weakness that could bring down everything we were building. Satisfied, I marked it with chalk and moved on. That was 23 years ago. Back when I still believed that if you built something right, if you followed the principles, if you checked every joint and tested every beam, nothing could bring it down. I was wrong. The paintbrush in my 70-year-old hand trembled slightly as I applied another coat of sealant to the basement stairs. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was alone in the house, the same house where Letitia and I had raised our son, where she'd taken her last breath 2 years ago in the sunroom I'd built so she could watch the Cardinals in winter. I set down the brush and pressed my palm against the third step, the one Raoul had mentioned last week when he'd stopped by. "Getting loose, Pop," he'd said, shaking his head with that concerned look that always made me feel like I was failing somehow. "You should really get someone to look at it." But I had looked at it. I'd replaced every tread with solid oak 2 weeks ago. I'd installed steel brackets beneath each step. I'd tested the load-bearing capacity myself, all 200 pounds of me jumping on this very step. It hadn't even creaked. I tested it again now, putting my full weight on it, bouncing slightly, solid as bedrock. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, probably Raoul's wife Bianca, with another subtle reminder about something else that needed fixing, another gentle prod about how I was getting up there in years and should consider downsizing. The phone rang again, and again. I pulled it out, frowning at the screen. Bianca's name flashed in the darkness of the basement. It was 2:30 in the morning. My thumb hovered over the answer button, and in that split second before I pressed it, I had no idea I was about to receive the phone call that would demolish everything I thought I knew about my family. "Hello? Pedro! Oh God, Pedro!" Bianca's voice shattered through the speaker so loud I had to pull the phone from my ear. "It's Raoul! You have to come now, Chicago Med! He's dying!" The paintbrush clattered from my hand. "What? What happened?" "The stairs!" she screamed, her voice raw with what sounded like genuine terror. "The stairs at your house! He fell! I told you they were loose! I told you to fix them! Oh God, there's so much blood!" The line went dead. I stood there in the basement, paint-stained hand gripping the phone, looking at the stairs I'd just tested, the stairs that were structurally impossible to fail. But guilt doesn't care about structural integrity. Guilt bypassed every logical circuit in my brain and went straight for my heart. I grabbed my keys and ran. I made it to Chicago Med in 18 minutes, pushing my truck to 80 on the expressway, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The pre-dawn streets were empty except for delivery trucks and the occasional cab. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every mile felt like a condemnation. I should have hired a contractor. I should have done more. I'm 70 years old. What if I missed something? The emergency room smelled exactly like I remembered from when Letitia was sick. Antiseptic and old pennies and something else, something that smelled like fear. I burst through the automatic doors and ran to the reception desk. Raul Gonzalez, my son, he was just brought in. "Cubicle 4, straight back," the nurse said without looking up from her computer. I found it quickly. Too quickly. Some part of me wanted more time before I saw whatever waited behind that curtain. Raul lay on the hospital bed, and for a moment I forgot he was 36 years old. He looked like a child. His right leg was elevated, wrapped in a temporary splint, soon to be encased in plaster. His face was a topographical map of purple bruises. His bottom lip was split open, swollen to twice its normal size. But what struck me most were his eyes. They were swimming with tears, yes, but there was something else there, something that looked almost calculated. "Dad?" He reached out with his good hand, grabbing the front of my jacket with surprising strength. "Dad, I told you those stairs were loose. The third step, it just snapped. I fell all the way down to the concrete, all the way down." I stood there, holding his hand, my mind racing. The stairs, the oak treads, the steel brackets, the testing. The doctor says his femur is shattered in 3 places. Bianca stepped out from the corner of the room, and I noticed she wasn't crying. Her makeup was perfect. Her expensive handbag sat on the chair beside her, not a hair out of place. She looked at me with eyes that held no grief, only something sharp and predatory. 3 places, Pedro. Do you understand what that means? He might need surgery, multiple surgeries. He'll be out of work for months. I'm so sorry, I started to say, the words automatic, the guilt overwhelming. I thought I fixed. You thought? Bianca's voice cracked like a whip. You thought? Look at him. Look at what your thinking did. She stepped between me and my son, one manicured finger pointing at my chest like a prosecutor making a closing argument. We told you that house was falling apart. We begged you to hire professionals. But no, you're too cheap. You sit on that pile of retirement money like a dragon hoarding gold while your only son shatters his bones on your rotting property. The words hit harder than any physical blow could. Each one felt designed to wound, crafted to hurt, and they were working. I'm not cheap, I said weakly. I bought you the house, the cars, I paid for 5 years ago, she snapped, and you've held it over our heads ever since. But now we need real compensation. Raul is a top real estate agent. Do you know how much commission he's going to lose? Who's going to pay our mortgage, our bills? You need to make this right, and not with pocket change. We're talking about serious money here. Raul groaned, louder this time. Bianca immediately softened, leaning over him, smoothing his hair with sudden tenderness that felt theatrical. It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. He's going to take care of us. She looked back at me, eyes hard again. He has to. Or we'll have to talk to a lawyer about negligence. The threat hung in the air between us. My own son, suing me. I waited for Raul to defend me, to tell his wife to stop, to say something, anything, that sounded like the boy I'd raised. Instead, he closed his eyes and nodded slowly. Yeah, Dad, you have to make it right. I'm in so much pain. The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in, the machines beeping a countdown to something I couldn't name. Go home, Pedro, Bianca commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Get your homeowner's insurance policy. Bring it here. We need to file a liability claim immediately. If you file it against yourself, the payout comes faster. She paused, letting that sink in. Lucas needs rest, and you're upsetting him. I nodded, defeated. 70 years of life felt suddenly heavier than they ever had before. I turned toward the door, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Behind me, I heard Bianca whisper to Raul, "See? I told you he'd fold." I should have heard the warning in those words. I should have stopped right there. Instead, I kept walking. I was halfway down the corridor, staring at my shoes, lost in a fog of guilt and confusion, when I collided with someone. Not a gentle bump, a deliberate slam that nearly knocked me sideways. "Oh, I'm so sorry." A woman's voice, urgent and breathless. I looked up. She was in her early 40s, wearing navy blue scrubs with a name tag that read, Rebecca Walsh, RN, head nurse. She had kind eyes, but right now those eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. I'm the one who should... I started to apologize, but she gripped my arm hard enough to hurt. Her eyes darted left, then right, checking the hallway. Then, in a movement so fast I almost missed it, she pressed a piece of paper into my palm and closed my fingers around it. I opened my mouth to ask what was happening, but she squeezed my hand even harder, silencing me. She leaned in close, pretending to check my pulse, and whispered 3 words that would change everything. Don't go back. Then she released my arm, straightened her uniform, and walked briskly down the hall as if nothing had happened. I stood frozen in the middle of the corridor while the hospital bustled around me, doctors rushing, gurneys rolling, announcements crackling over the intercom. But I was in a bubble of silence, feeling the paper burning in my closed fist. I made it to my truck in the parking garage before I opened my hand. The note was written on a torn page from a medical notepad, the handwriting rushed and jagged. Mr. Gonzalez, your son is lying to you. I can't say more here. Check your home camera system. 3 a.m., April 17th. I don't expect anything from you. But my father once told me you were the only person who helped us when no one else cared. Now it's my turn. Be careful. RW. I stared at the words, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. Not the slow, heavy thud of grief I'd felt earlier. This was sharper, faster, the rhythm of suspicion. Check your home camera system. And then I remembered something. Something I'd nearly forgotten in the chaos. 5 years ago, when I'd bought Raul and Bianca that house, the $1.2 million home with no mortgage, I'd installed a comprehensive smart home system, security cameras outside, motion sensors inside, everything feeding to a local server in the basement. They knew about the exterior cameras, of course. But what they didn't know was that the system had internal logs, motion-activated recording in the living room, disguised as a smoke detector, and everything backed up to a cloud server that I had administrator access to. I'd never checked it. I'd respected their privacy. But tonight, privacy felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. I didn't drive home to my house, I drove to theirs. I still had the emergency key. As I pulled onto their street at 4:15 a.m., I noticed something on their front lawn, a for sale sign, barely visible in the darkness. They were selling? They'd never mentioned that. I let myself in through the side door. The house was dark and silent. They were both still at the hospital. The air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of old wine and something burnt. I made my way through the kitchen, past the granite countertops I'd helped pick out, past the Sub-Zero refrigerator I'd bought as a housewarming gift. Something on the kitchen table caught my eye. A pile of envelopes, red envelopes. I picked up the top one. It was from First National Bank, a foreclosure warning. My hands started to shake. Foreclosure? But there's no mortgage. I bought this house cash. I opened the letter with trembling fingers. There was a mortgage, a second mortgage taken out 3 years ago for $800,000, and it was in default. I grabbed the next envelope, a letter from a casino in Indiana. Outstanding gambling debt, $450,000. The next one, a note from someone named Danny Torres with a phone number and a simple message, Raul, this is the last friendly reminder. Money plus interest equals $380,000 by end of month or I come to the house. DT. Credit cards, $220,000 in combined debt. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs I'd assembled myself when they first moved in, and did the math. My son, the successful real estate agent, was drowning in over $1.8 million in debt. Suddenly, the insurance claim made perfect sense. This wasn't about medical bills. This was about survival. This was about paying off a loan shark named Danny before he made good on his threat. I stood up on legs that felt weak and made my way down to the basement, to the small office where I'd set up their server. I had to know the truth. The computer screen cast a blue glow across my face as I typed in my administrator password. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled up the camera logs and scrolled back to April 17th, 2 days ago, 3 a.m. I clicked play. The image that appeared on the screen was crystal clear, high definition. It showed their living room, the same room where Raul and Bianca had hosted Christmas dinner last year, where Letitia had sat in her wheelchair and smiled despite the pain. Raul was there, but he wasn't injured. He was pacing back and forth, holding a bottle of whiskey, his face a mask of terror. Bianca sat on the sofa, perfectly calm. In her hands, she held a baseball bat wrapped in a thick white towel. I watched, unable to breathe, as Bianca stood up. I turned up the volume. "Stop crying, Raul." Her voice came through the speakers, tiny but perfectly clear. "It's the only way. The old man has a liability policy for $500,000. If you fall at his house, insurance pays out immediately. We pay Danny, we save the house, and we're free." She gestured to the coffee table. "Now sit down and prop your leg up. We're doing this." I watched my son, my own flesh and blood, sit down on the coffee table. He positioned his right leg on the ottoman. He took a long drink from the whiskey bottle, his hands shaking. He looked at his wife, and he nodded. Bianca didn't hesitate. She raised the bat high above her head. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close my eyes, but I forced myself to watch. The bat came down. Crack! The sound of bone shattering came through the computer speakers, and I felt something break inside me that had nothing to do with bones. Raul's scream was animalistic, raw. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his leg, the compound fracture visible even through the video quality. Bianca dropped the bat, picked up her phone and dialed 911. Her voice transformed instantly from monster to panicked wife. "Please, I need an ambulance. My husband fell at his father's house. I think his leg is broken. Please hurry." The video ended. I sat in the darkness of the basement, the image frozen on the screen. Bianca's face, calm and calculated, preparing to swing the bat. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I felt something shift inside me. The father in me. The part that wanted to believe, to forgive, to excuse. That part went quiet. What remained was the engineer. The part of me that looked at a failed structure and knew exactly what had to be done. When a building is rotted from the inside, you don't patch it, you condemn it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I started copying the files, the video, the motion logs, everything. They wanted insurance money. They wanted my help. They wanted me to be the victim, the guilty party, the fool. Well, I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. But first, I needed to know how deep the rot went. I didn't go home. At 6:30 in the morning, with the USB drive burning a hole in my jacket pocket, I drove straight to the Loop and parked outside a limestone building I'd helped design 30 years ago. The brass plaque beside the entrance read, "Caldwell and Associates, Attorneys at Law." James Caldwell wasn't just my lawyer, he was my oldest friend. We'd played poker every Friday night for 20 years until Letitia got sick. He was the only man alive who knew the exact dimensions of my finances and the only man I trusted to help me fortify them against the siege I was currently under. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mr. Gonzalez, he's expecting you." I'd called Jim from the car, told him I needed to see him immediately. Told him it was about protecting my assets from my own family. Jim was standing by the window of his corner office when I walked in. He's a big man, former linebacker at Northwestern, but age had softened him around the edges. When he saw my face, he didn't smile. "Sit down, Pedro. You look like hell." I sat in the leather wingback chair, the same chair where I'd signed my will after Letitia died. "Jim, I need to lock everything down. Today. My house, the lake cabin, the investment accounts, all of it. I want it in an irrevocable trust. I want to make sure that even if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Raul can't touch a single cent without trustee approval." Jim picked up his yellow legal pad, his expression grave. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told him about the hospital, about Bianca's threats, about the pile of debt I'd found on their kitchen table. I left out the video for now. I needed to deal with the financial bleeding first. "I want everything protected," I finished. "They're desperate, Jim, and desperate people are dangerous." He nodded slowly, taking notes. "I'll draw up the trust documents today. But first, let me check the current deed status on your primary residence. We need to make sure the title is clear before we transfer it." He turned to his computer, typing with 2 fingers. "Should be quick. I know you paid that mortgage off 20 years ago." I watched his reflection in the computer screen. I saw him squint, then stop typing, then lean closer to the monitor. His jaw tightened. "Pedro." His voice dropped an octave. "When did you take out a second mortgage?" The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What are you talking about? I haven't owed a dime on that house since 1998. You know that. I framed the payoff letter from the bank." Jim turned the monitor toward me and pointed to a line on the screen. It was a lien, a secured loan against my property address, the house where I lived, the house where Letitia died. "Recorded 3 years ago," Jim read, his voice flat with disbelief. "Lender is Atlantic Capital Group LLC, based in Delaware. Principal amount, $800,000. He paused, and I saw something like pity cross his face. "Pedro, look at the status." The text was red, bright, angry red, default. Pre-foreclosure proceedings initiated. My vision started to tunnel. $800,000. My house, my sanctuary, the place where I'd raised my son, where I'd built a sunroom for Letitia so she could watch the birds in winter. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to a bank in Delaware. "I didn't sign that," I whispered, the words barely making it past my throat. "Jim, I never signed that." He clicked on a PDF attachment. A scanned document appeared, the loan agreement, and there at the bottom of the last page was my signature, Pedro J. Gonzalez. The loops on the P were perfect, the slant of the G was precise. It was my signature, but I had never held that pen. "Raul," I said, and the name tasted like ash in my mouth. Jim's face hardened with professional rage. He forged it. He must have traced it from an old check or a birthday card, and he had to have a notary in his pocket to stamp it. He paused, letting me absorb the blow. "Pedro, this loan is 3 years old. He's been intercepting your mail. That's why you never saw the statements. That's why you never saw the default notices. He's been stealing your mail for 3 years." It all made sense now. The times Raul would drop by unexpectedly, offering to help out by getting the mail because of my bad knees. The times he'd insisted on house-sitting when Letitia and I went to the lake cabin. He hadn't been being a good son. He'd been covering his tracks. He'd stolen my home out from under me while I was sleeping in it. "We can fight this," Jim said gently. "We can prove fraud. We can hire a handwriting expert. But Pedro?" He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "If we do that, if we file a police report for forgery and grand larceny, Raul is going to prison. There's no middle ground here. This is a felony, a massive one." I closed my eyes. The image of the baseball bat flashed in my mind. The sound of the crack, the look on Bianca's face, cold, calculated, remorseless. They'd been willing to break bones for $500,000. What would they do if they knew I'd discovered an $800,000 theft? They weren't just thieves, they were termites. They'd eaten through the wood, through the support beams, leaving nothing but a shell of a family that was waiting to collapse on top of me. If I didn't act now, if I didn't cut them out completely, I would be buried in the rubble. I stood up and walked to the window, looked down at the street below, at people walking to work, living their lives, trusting their families. I felt profoundly isolated. I was an engineer who'd just discovered that the bridge he'd built was made of paper. "Do it," I said to my reflection in the glass. "Do what, Pedro?" I turned around. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that remained was cold, hard calculation. Structural integrity had been compromised. Demolition was the only option. "Draw up the papers, Jim, not for a trust." I walked back to the desk and placed the USB drive on its polished surface. "I want you to prepare a full criminal complaint. I want the handwriting expert. I want the affidavit. I want you to contact the bank holding the note and tell them the signature is fraudulent. Tell them I'm pressing charges." "Pedro," Jim stood up, his face troubled. "That's your son. Once we start this, we can't stop it. He'll go to jail for a long time." I looked at my oldest friend. I thought about Letitia. I thought about how she would feel knowing her son had sold our memories for poker chips. And then I thought about the poison they were planning. "I don't have a son," I said, my voice steady and flat. "I have a criminal who broke into my life. I want him gone, Jim. I don't just want to kick them out. I want to bury them under the weight of their own lies." I pushed the USB drive across the desk. "And there's something else you need to see, because the mortgage fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. You're going to need a bigger file, Jim. We're going to need the district attorney for this one." Jim took the drive and inserted it into his computer. I sat back down and watched his face as the video played. I watched the color drain from his skin. I watched his hands clench into fists. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long moment. "Jesus Christ, Pedro, this is attempted insurance fraud, conspiracy. And if they'd succeeded..." He trailed off, then looked at me with something like awe. "You could have signed those papers at the hospital. You could have given them power of attorney. They would have drained every account you have." "I know." "We need to call Bob Miller. We need to..." My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Gonzalez, this is Rebecca Walsh. Can you meet me tonight? 9 p.m., Murphy's Diner on State Street. I have something else you need to hear. Please come alone. R.W." I showed the text to Jim. "Who's Rebecca Walsh?" "The nurse who gave me the note, the one who told me to check the cameras." I stood up. "I need to meet her, but first I need you to start on those criminal complaints. Have them ready, but don't file them yet." "Why wait?" "Because I need to know everything they've done, every lie, every crime. I want a complete picture before I bring the building down." Jim nodded slowly. "I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow. But Pedro, be careful. If they suspect you know..." "They won't," I said. Because tonight, I'm going to call Bianca. I'm going to tell her I'm too tired to come back to the hospital. And I'm going to tell her I've already signed the power of attorney papers. Murphy's Diner was one of those 24-hour places that smelled like coffee and fried onions and had seen better decades. I sat in a back booth at 8:55 p.m., nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. Rebecca Walsh walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. She was wearing a heavy coat over her scrubs and a wool hat pulled low. She didn't look like the confident head nurse who ran the floor with an iron fist. She looked like a woman who was constantly looking over her shoulder. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands wrapped around her purse like a life preserver. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "You could lose your job, your license. Why take the risk for an old man you don't even know?" She took a breath, and a small, sad smile touched her lips. "But I do know you, Mr. Gonzalez. You just don't know me." She paused. "You knew my father, Michael Walsh. He was a foreman on the Millennium Spire project 20 years ago." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mike Walsh. I remembered him. Good man, hard worker, laugh that could fill a construction site. I remembered the day the scaffolding collapsed, the sound of steel giving way, the silence after. Mike survived, but his back was shattered. The construction company tried to bury him, claimed it was operator error, denied his workers' comp, tried to starve him out so he'd settle for pennies. "I remember," I said softly. "I'm sorry for what happened to him." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "We were going to lose our house. Mom was working 3 jobs. Dad needed surgery the insurance wouldn't cover because the company was fighting the claim. We were packing boxes, ready to move into a shelter." She reached across the table and took my hand. And then an envelope showed up in our mailbox. No return address, just a cashier's check for $45,000. I looked down at our joined hands. I remembered that check. I remembered walking into the dealership and selling my 1967 Mustang, the car I'd restored piece by piece since I was 25. My pride and joy. But when I'd looked at Mike Walsh in that wheelchair, a car seemed like a stupid thing to hold on to. "It was enough for the surgery," Rebecca whispered. "It saved his life. It saved our home. Dad suspected it was you. He said you were the only engineer who came to visit him in the hospital, the only one who looked him in the eye." She squeezed my hand. "When I saw your name on the chart for room 402 and I heard that woman screaming at you, I knew I had to do something. I'm paying a debt, Mr. Gonzalez, just like you did. You don't owe me anything, Rebecca. But thank you. You saved me from making a terrible mistake." She pulled her hand back and reached into her purse. Her expression shifted from nostalgic to terrified. "I didn't just come here to talk about the past, Pedro." She glanced around the diner, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "I have to show you something else, something worse." She pulled out a small digital voice recorder, the kind doctors use for dictating notes. She placed it on the table between us and covered it with her hand. "The intercom system in room 402 is old. Sometimes the button sticks on the patient's side, leaving an open line to the nurse's station." Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Usually we just hear the TV or snoring. But this afternoon, about 2 hours after you left, the light flickered on. Bianca thought the room was private. She thought no one was listening." She looked at me with eyes that held genuine fear. "I was at the desk, and I hit record." She pushed the recorder toward me. I stared at the small black device. I thought I'd seen the bottom with the video of the broken leg. I thought I knew how low they could go. But the look in Rebecca's eyes told me I was wrong. The barrel had no bottom. I picked up the recorder with hands that had started to shake. I held it to my ear. Rebecca pressed play. The audio was fuzzy at first, static in the background hum of hospital ventilation. Then Bianca's voice cut through, sharp and impatient. "Stop whining about the pain meds, Raul. You need to be lucid when he comes back. We need that signature." Raul's voice, slurred and weak. "He's not going to sign it, Bianca. He knows something. Did you see the way he looked at me? He looked at me like I was a stranger." Bianca laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "He's just confused. He's old. That's why this is going to be so easy. Once we get the power of attorney, we transfer the liquid assets first. Then we sell the stocks. We can have the accounts drained in 3 days." That was bad. But it was nothing I didn't already know from the video and the mortgage fraud. I waited. "But what about him?" Raoul asked, fear creeping into his voice. "He isn't just going to let us take it. He'll go to the police. He'll fight us." There was a pause on the tape, a silence that felt heavy and charged. Then Bianca spoke again, her voice lower, more deliberate. "He won't fight anyone, Raoul." Another pause. "You told me yourself. He has a heart condition. He takes beta blockers, blood thinners. He's a walking time bomb." "What are you saying?" Raoul whispered. And then Bianca said it, the words that turned fraud and theft into something infinitely darker. "I'm saying old men die in their sleep all the time, especially when they're stressed, especially when they accidentally take too much medication, or maybe the wrong medication." My hand gripped the recorder so hard the plastic creaked. "Insulin," Bianca continued, her voice so casual she could have been ordering lunch. "It's clean, metabolizes quickly. If an old man with a weak heart has a sudden hypoglycemic event in his sleep, the coroner calls it natural causes. No autopsy, just a grieving son and a funeral." She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "And then we're the sole beneficiaries of the life insurance policy. 2 million plus the house plus the accounts. We'll be kings, Raoul. We just need to get through this week." The recording ended with a click. I sat there in the booth, frozen. The diner noise, the clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, the chatter of other patrons, all of it faded away. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, the heart they planned to stop. This wasn't fraud anymore. This wasn't theft. This was conspiracy to commit murder. They were planning to kill me. My daughter-in-law was planning to inject me with insulin and watch me die. And my son, my own son, hadn't screamed in horror, hadn't called for help. He'd just listened. I looked up at Rebecca. Her face was pale, trembling. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "I couldn't go to the police yet. It's just a recording. They might say they were joking. They might say I fabricated it. But I knew you needed to know. You can't let them near you, Pedro. You can't eat anything they give you. You can't be alone with them." I handed the recorder back to her with surprisingly steady hands. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a clarity that was sharp as diamond. They wanted to kill me. They wanted to erase me from the earth so they could consume what I'd built. They'd crossed a line from which there was no return. Before this moment, I'd wanted justice. I'd wanted my money back. I'd wanted to teach them a lesson. Now I realized I was in a war. And in war, you don't just defend yourself. You neutralize the threat. "Keep that recording safe, Rebecca," I said, my voice low and hard. "Don't delete it. Don't show it to anyone else yet." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. I stood up and buttoned my coat. I felt the weight of 70 years, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was armor. "I'm going to give them what they want," I said. "They want the power of attorney. They want access to my life. I'm going to invite them in." I reached into my wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table for the coffee. "But they don't know that I'm not the prey anymore. I'm the trap." I walked out of the diner into the cold Chicago night. The air bit at my face, sharp and clean. I had work to do. I had to call Chief Bob Miller. I had to call Jim Caldwell, and I had to prepare a dinner because Bianca wanted to serve me soup. Well, I was going to serve her a meal she would never forget. The structural integrity of their plot was about to be tested, and I was going to be the one swinging the wrecking ball. Chief Bob Miller arrived at my house at 10 that night. I showed him everything, the video, the audio recording. When it ended, he stood up, hand moving toward his gun. "This is enough, Pedro. Conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, forgery. We can arrest them tonight." "No," I said. "If you arrest them now, Bianca gets a lawyer, claims it was just talk. I want to catch her with the poison in her hand." Bob stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We'll wire you up. I'll have officers in the pantry and garage, but if this goes wrong, it won't." I called Bianca, pitching my voice tired and frail. "I'm too exhausted to drive back to the hospital, but I've signed the papers. Why don't you come here? I made chicken soup." Silence. Then, "I'll be there in an hour." The next 45 minutes were preparation. Bob fitted me with a wire. 2 officers positioned themselves in my pantry with cameras. 3 more waited in the garage. I set the table for two, placed an empty folder in the center, and let the pot of soup simmer. At 8:45, headlights swept across my window. Bianca walked in without greeting me, eyes locked on the folder. "Where is it?" "Right there. But please, sit. Let me get you some soup." She calculated. 15 minutes equals $2 million. She sat, placing her oversized handbag on the table beside her bowl. I filled both bowls, but didn't eat. "I think I need napkins." I turned my back, watching her reflection in the decorative mirror above the stove. Her hand darted into her bag. She pulled out a small glass vial, insulin. Her hand reached toward my bowl. I spun around. "Oh, I forgot spoons too," she gasped, jerking back. The vial disappeared under the table. Her spoon clattered to the floor. "You seem nervous, Bianca," I said quietly. "I'm stressed," she snapped. "My husband is in the hospital and you're playing host." I gripped the back of my chair. "I've been thinking about those stairs. About termites. Creatures that eat through wood from the inside. That smile at you while the roof waits to collapse." I paused. "Or maybe they decide to poison the owner." Her face flushed red. She stood, knocking over her chair. "You're senile. Give me the damn paper or I'll have you declared incompetent by Monday." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "Here's what you deserve." I tossed it on the table. She tore it open. Eviction notice, fraud complaint, then a photograph, time-stamped 3 a.m., Bianca holding a baseball bat over Raoul's propped leg. She made a sound that wasn't human. You watched." "I saw everything. The bat, the vial in your hand tonight. I heard you planning my funeral." She looked at the knife block, 5 feet away. "You old bastard!" she screamed. "You're a dead man." She lunged for the chef's knife, grabbed it, raised it high. "I'll kill you." I didn't move. I said one word, loud and clear. "Now." The pantry door exploded outward. 3 officers burst in. "Police! Drop the knife!" Bianca's arm jerked. The knife missed me by inches, burying itself in the oak table. Before she could react, the lead officer slammed into her. She hit the floor hard, face down, arm twisted behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut. "Get off me!" she shrieked. "He attacked me!" Chief Miller walked in, weapon holstered. "We have it all on tape, Bianca. The audio, the video, the vial, the knife. Save your breath." As they dragged her out, she screamed back at me. "Raoul won't forgive you. He loves me. He'll hate you." I looked at her with nothing but empty silence. "He's next," I said. The door slammed shut. I didn't go home. At midnight, I drove straight to Chicago Med with Chief Miller and Jim Caldwell. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. When I pushed open the door to room 402, Raoul was propped up in bed, smiling expectantly. His smile died when he saw Jim, then Bob in uniform. "What's going on? Where's Bianca?" I didn't answer. I walked to the TV and turned it on, flipping to local news. The anchor's face filled the screen. Breaking news from Oak Park. Police have arrested a local woman in connection with a plot to murder her father-in-law. The image cut to my house. Police lights. 2 officers dragging Bianca out in handcuffs, screaming. The chyron read, "Attempted poisoning, insurance fraud scheme exposed." I turned off the TV. Raoul stared at the blank screen, mouth open. His skin turned the color of ash. Then he started shaking, violent tremors that rattled the bed frame. A dark stain spread across the blue hospital sheet. He'd wet himself. "Dad," he whispered, tears streaming. "Dad, please. It wasn't me. She forced me. You know how she is. She made me do it. She broke my leg. I'm a victim, too." He reached out a trembling hand. "I'm your son." I stepped closer until my face was inches from his. "You're not a victim, Raoul. I saw the video. I saw you sit down. I saw you nod. You broke your own leg because you were too lazy to work and too cowardly to face your debts." I straightened up. "That leg will hurt for a long time. The doctors say it's a bad break. Every time it throbs, every time you limp, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you bought that pain. It's the only thing you own now." Jim placed an envelope on the tray over his lap. The eviction notice, the fraud complaint. "Dad," Raoul's voice cracked. "I'm your son." I looked at him, the man who'd stolen my house, who'd waited for me to die. "I don't have a son," I said. "I used to have a son, but he died a long time ago. What I have now is a bad debt, and tonight I'm writing it off." I turned and walked out. Behind me, Raoul screamed, "Dad, come back, please, Dad!" I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The screams faded with every step. I felt lighter than I had in months. 3 months later, I sat in the witness box at Cook County Courthouse. Bianca sat on the left in a modest beige cardigan, hair dyed brown, refusing to look at me. Raoul sat on the right in his walking boot, dabbing at his eyes with tissues every time the jury looked his way. His lawyer, Sterling, paced before the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen, we don't deny that crimes were committed, but look at my client. He was terrorized. He lived in a home controlled by a woman who wielded a baseball bat as a weapon of compliance. He was physically assaulted, psychologically broken. He didn't conspire to kill his father. He was a hostage in his own marriage." I watched the jury. A few heads nodded. An older woman in the second row looked sympathetic. Sterling was good. He was painting Raoul as a pathetic leaf blown by Hurricane Bianca. If they bought it, Raoul might walk with probation. The prosecutor stood. "Mr. Gonzalez, do you have any response to the defense's characterization of your son as a passive victim?" I leaned forward to the microphone. "I do." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't part of the original discovery file. My forensic accountant had found it 2 days ago, buried deep in encrypted chat logs from the server I'd seized. I handed it to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge. The judge, a stern woman with glasses, read it. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked at Raoul with a gaze that could freeze water. "Please read it for the record, Mr. Gonzalez." I cleared my throat. "This is an email sent from Raul Gonzalez's private encrypted account to an address associated with the loan shark known as Danny Torres. It's dated 3 days before he broke his leg." I began to read. "Danny, I know I'm late, but I have a solution. Stop threatening the house. The old man is 68. He has a heart condition. He's weak. I'm going to make sure he checks out early. We'll have the insurance money and the estate within the month. Just give me a few weeks to set the stage. He trusts me. He's stupid. He won't see it coming. R." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The sympathy in the jury box vanished instantly, replaced by collective revulsion. I looked at Raoul. The hope in his eyes died. His face turned the color of old ash. He slumped in his chair, shrinking into himself. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a hostage. He was the architect. He'd sold his father's life to save his own skin. Sterling sat down heavily. He didn't even try to object. He knew it was over. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "We, the jury, find the defendant Bianca Gonzalez guilty on all counts. We, the jury, find the defendant Raul Gonzalez guilty on all counts." The judge didn't waste time. She looked at Bianca. 20 years in state prison without possibility of parole for 15. Then at Raul. "You betrayed the most fundamental bond of human nature. 15 years. The gavel banged down. Sharp. Final. As the bailiffs dragged Raoul past me, he locked eyes with me, his face twisted with pure hatred. "You'll die alone," he screamed, spittle flying. "You'll rot in that house and no one will find you for weeks. You're nothing without me." I looked at him and felt nothing. I stood up, picked up my hat and walked down the center aisle. Behind me, Raoul was still screaming, "You need me!" I pushed open the double doors and stepped into the bright Chicago sunshine. The sun in the Florida Keys hits different than Chicago. It doesn't just illuminate, it warms you all the way through. I'm sitting on the porch of a small yellow bungalow that sits on stilts above white sand. The ocean stretches endlessly before me, turquoise and sapphire and every shade of blue in between. I have a canvas in front of me and oil paints in hand. I'm not building skyscrapers anymore. I'm trying to capture the exact shade where water meets sky. I'm not very good at it yet. My lines are too straight. But for the first time in my life, I'm allowed to make mistakes. It's been a year since the trial, 6 months to settle affairs in Chicago. Selling the house was harder than expected, not because of the market, but because of the memories. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, touched the wall where we'd marked the boys' heights, stood in the kitchen where Bianca tried to kill me. But when I closed the front door, I didn't look back. I didn't keep all the money. $32 million is too much for one old man who likes simple food and quiet mornings. I kept enough for this bungalow and my comfort. The rest went somewhere it could do good. I established the Michael Walsh Nursing Scholarship, a full-ride endowment for students from working-class families who want to go into nursing. I put Rebecca in charge of the selection committee. The day I told her, we were sitting in a coffee shop. I slid the trust documents across the table. She read them and started crying right there. She came around the table and hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. "You didn't have to do this. You pulled me out of the fire," I said. "This is the least I can do." We talk every Sunday now. She tells me about the students they're helping. Last week, she ended the call by saying, "I love you, Dad." It wasn't a slip. It was a choice. She chose me as family, just as I chose her. And that word, Dad, coming from her healed a part of my heart I thought was dead forever. My phone buzzes on the small wooden table beside my easel. The screen lights up. It's a number I've memorized, not because I call it, but because I ignore it. Illinois State Penitentiary System. It's Raul, or maybe Bianca. It's Tuesday, the day Raul usually calls. He's been in for a year. He has 14 more to go. I can imagine what he wants. Money for commissary, a better lawyer, or maybe just to scream at me again. I look at the phone. I feel a phantom ache in my chest, a ghost of the love I used to have for the little boy with scraped knees. But then I remember the sound of bone snapping, the silence when his wife talked about insulin, the hatred in his eyes in the courtroom. I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel removed. I don't answer. I don't let it ring out. I press the side button to silence the call. Then I open settings, find the number, and select block caller. A dialog box pops up asking me to confirm. I press yes. It's a small digital action, a tap of a finger, but it feels like cutting the last thread of a heavy anchor. I put the phone back on the table, face down. The buzzing stops. The only sound is the waves lapping against the pilings and the cry of a pelican diving for fish. I pick up my brush again. The paint is still wet. I look at the horizon I'm trying to paint. It's vast and open and full of possibility. I'm 69 years old. I have a bad back and a heart that skips a beat sometimes. But I've never felt more alive. I have a legacy that's clean. I have a daughter who loves me for who I am, not what I have. And I have this view. People always say blood is thicker than water. They use it as a weapon to bind you to people who hurt you, who drain you, who would break your bones for a payout. They tell you family is everything, that you have to forgive, that you have to endure. But looking out at this endless blue ocean, I know the truth. Sometimes clean water is better than poisoned blood. I lived in a toxic house for too long. I let the rot spread because I was afraid to tear down the walls, but I learned that you can't fix a foundation built on lies. You have to demolish it. You have to clear the rubble, and only then can you build something new. I cut out the necrotic part of my life. The surgery was painful. The recovery was long, but the infection is gone. I'm healing. I dip my brush into white paint and add a single bright highlight to the crest of a wave on my canvas. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to seeing how the picture turns out.